Hello and welcome back to another episode of Plate Stack Chat with myself, Sam Laroche, Jason Lacroxon, or Jason CF Media, as you might have seen him now, the real media. We are, and you are in for a treat this fine evening. His wife calls him Dickhead. Officially, but we have I've got a long list of titles. We have Flowmaster, Seminar Staff, UK and Ireland Manager for CrossFit Affiliates, and newly appointed Competition Liaison for Strength in Depth CrossFit No Ball CrossFit Games Semi Final. The one and only, literally the one and only, Karl Steadman. Welcome to the podcast, buddy.
That's some intro, mate. Plus, I've got to give you kudos, team. Like that intro, I was like, I feel like I'm going into a movie theater right now. That was pretty legit right there.
I missed off King of UK CrossFit.
Negative.
I missed it.
Old is what that means, mate. I was, been around for a while. That's all that means. Like bad furniture or a smell.
Bad furniture. Oh, we love it. Well, thank you all for tuning in today. Thank you, Karl, for coming. Now we've done that. That's taken so long. We'll probably just do an outro and we're done. All the titles. No, I've just stolen Jason's joke. But yeah,
this is sometimes Sam likes to reveal the behind the scenes. Yeah. This is the biggest reveal of behind the scenes. Is quite often we'll say some stuff behind, and then we'll go live, and then Sam will steal it all. So I came up with that. I knew all these facts. This is all me. Yeah. And I've never called him out on it, and then he's just revealed it himself tonight. So,
if you want to watch
the door was slightly open, and I just kicked it the rest.
If you want to watch all the videos of me doing all the new stuff, just go to my YouTube channel, Jason CF Media, and then you'll see it all there. So we are, as I said, it's a massive pleasure to have you on, mate. I've met you a couple of times now, and we've shared email. To be honest, I've met your kids more than you, and they're freaking legends as well. Probably more than you and the Queen. But
strong maybe, because I mean, as we all know with kids, like you equally want to punch them in the face, but you also love them all at the same time. That's the beautifulness of having kids, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, they're actually the only people who have got me told off on this podcast currently, because when we were at Strength in Depth Origins and we did the podcast, I don't know if you remember, but I was on the floor doing stretches with them, and they were taking me through basically the whole of CrossFit Level 1 again, whilst I was supposed to be on the podcast. So there we go.
Osmosis, mate. They get annoyed at me all the time, like because we just came back from the affiliate gathering as well, right? So they were giving me grief. They were saying, "I'm going to go down to Strength in Depth, Dad. Is it just going to be you talking about CrossFit again?" And I'm like, no. This is people doing CrossFit, mate. And they were like, "Oh, okay, that's all right then." I'm like, "Oh, you cheeky little." Anyway,
they love it.
Yeah, they love it.
Oh, wicked. Well, we've got you on. The main reason we've got you on is because you're pretty hot. You're kind of a big deal, mate. I'll be honest. I know you don't think you are, but there's a lot of people out there who do. But the reason we have got you on is because for the last title that we went for, the Competition Liaison for Strength in Depth.
Yep.
Now, there's been some controversy over what that even means at the moment. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the real media. Chalk and Fitness of no, the morning chalk up have been doing stuff about that, about the Scott Panchik injury, about what on earth is going on. Now, we can't, if you want a great video on that, go to Jason's YouTube channel. He's great. But I don't want to pick over the bones of that too much. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that too much. I mean, if you want to, great. Maybe Jason is, but I'm
going to comment on it, or I'm going to make.
No, I think you want comment from the king of UK CrossFit right there. You can.
I need another video for Friday. So
there you go. Stead has said.
Yeah, imagine Stead has got sacked. Oh
yeah. No, I know you hold no punches when it comes to, or you pull no punches when it comes to telling people how it is. But so we've obviously had an injury. There was obviously some kind of breakdown between various people. What I really want to know is, firstly, what is a competition liaison? What do you see your job as being for Strength in Depth?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a legitimate question. And sometimes I think that can be the confusion, like where has it come about and what was it in terms of planning? So, honestly enough, I'm a minion in the grand scheme of things. So I'm not privy to those kind of machinations and also what went down in terms of like what they wanted to plan for the competition season. But I was asked a good couple of months ago to just be like, hey, would you be able to be a competition liaison for strength and depth? And I was like, yeah, sure. And in the back of my mind, the question was, what the hell does that mean? Okay. And then basically it's kind of like, it's a support role is what I see. You're there as an extra resource. You're there to maybe plug the gaps. I mean, let me backtrack a little bit and kind of say how all the competition liaisons are folk that have spent a lot of time around the competitive scene of CrossFit from putting it on point of view. So they're either well-experienced head judges, floor judges, maybe even sort of helpful at head judge level, at regionals level or anything like that. So you would have seen it in terms of just this last weekend gone. The people that were involved there have got a lot of time in trade on the competitive side. So it's a resource for people to tap on into. So from my perspective, when I'm looking at strength in depth, I'm seeing that it's going to be an easy weekend. Now, what I mean by that for me is there are a ton of very experienced characters involved at all levels. So I'm not having to worry, for an example, about the head judge team not doing a job, as an example. I'm not going to have to worry about the competition director not doing a job or the event director not doing a job, because I know all of those characters and I know how much time they spent in trade. And the head judges are both seminar staff flow masters. So I'm like, I look at all of those characters and I'm like, yeah, they've got no problem of holding standards and doing those things. So I'm an extra resource for people to lean on the experience that perhaps I could bring from being in that trade for a little while. Maybe perhaps just the ability to have that step back and an overview over the wide thing, because we all know what it's like. It can be very myopic, your view, right? In terms of, if I'm a head judge, my world is 100% that dance floor. So therefore I'm going to be walking around and I'm going to make sure, right, do my judges come on the floor at the right time? Do I have enough judges across the weekend? Are they going to be holding the standard? And do I have to figure that out? I'm going to be looking at what's the event that's coming up next, is the accurate equipment on the floor. I'm going to be walking that and making sure, hey, do I have the right barbells? Do I have the right weights? Do I have the right layout? Do I have so there's a multiple factors there, but that's my world. Everything else that occurs off of the dance floor is not my world. And therefore I kind of can wash my hands of that whole procedure. Where that can sometimes run afoul is the lack of connection. So, like, let's say that the wrong equipment is on, like, where do you go? So it's connecting those dots and looking at the broad picture and being like, hey, is there enough gear in the athlete warm-up area, for example? And are they being prepared for, like, let's say that there's, I don't know, for example, sandbag cleans coming up. Are there those sandbags in the athlete area? I can be the one that can be sort of bigger picture, plug the gaps, and then do that hard work to back up the existing team, because it's their event. I'm there as a guest there to help with the overall run of it. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of the job. I mean, there's more specific details in terms of my roles that I can do, but realistically, it's just to be there to advocate and connect the dots between event direction and athletes.
There's two things I want to pick out there. The first one, I think you've just given us a spoiler into the workouts. Sandbag cleans might be in there.
Week, mate.
Yeah, I know that.
He may just have been pulling an example from the competitions just
gone.
More sandbags used
but
multiple times.
Now you're just questioning it. We had an exclusive and you lost it, Jace. What are you playing at here?
This is what I do. I ask questions,
you
get
analyze
the insight, and I don't just run with the narrative that I particularly want. I ask all the questions just to make sure we're getting
secondly, then I'm going to throw out, so you're talking sort of situations. I'm going to throw out like a hypothetical situation now. Okay. So say, I don't know, you're giving a briefing at like 7:30 in the morning. I feel like we know where this
time you picked.
I feel like we know where this is going. And an athlete, and you're present in the briefing. And there are a whole bunch of other people that are all present in the briefing. Now, if an athlete makes aware that there might be an issue with an event, with the safety of an event, say, how will that be dealt with at SiD?
So realistically, there's levels there, right? So if it's raised in the public forum, so as I'm aware of it, then it would.
So if I go, hey, yeah, as an athlete, I go, hey, what about this? That's an issue. You know, in the presence of everybody. Hey, I think that's an issue. We've had this before, and there was an issue there. Previous, a couple of people got injured. What are we going to do about that, guys?
Yeah.
Have we thought about this?
Yeah. So realistically, they're all grown adults and I'm not their dad. So I would expect a professional head judge team and/or competition director to then get together, bat their heads together, and then come up with a solution. And I would probably just be at that point a keen observer. And so it would just be like, come up to the resolution, like, cool. And if they come to a resolution that everybody's happy with, then good to go. As long as I agreed with it. If I didn't, then I would perhaps interject and be like, hey, you should consider this from another perspective. But realistically, it's on that event team to have come up with the solution. And if they come to the democratic thing of like, hey, this is what we're going to do, then fair enough. That's what we need to do. I mean, I would strongly argue if it was any particular thing. And I mean, I know we're probably going down the rabbit hole of like rope climb and extra rope on the floor. Like, I get it.
Why not? Why not go there?
Yeah. And so, I think it's a tough one to do, like, hopefully I'd like to think that if I saw it, then I'd be going over to folk and being like, hey, can you see that this might be an issue coming up? And have you got a contingency plan? And are we looking at this even? Is it even on the radar? Because that's going to be the first question. So if it's on a radar, then cool. Have you got a plan for it? Do you not see it as being an issue? Then okay, I might have a further conversation there. This is it's a very unique situation with that regard to that particular thing. So it just requires a conversation needing to happen and perhaps just giving a different perspective to help guide a decision rather than kind of running in and like, I don't have the authority to just be like, well, now you're doing what I'm saying. I'm there as a support capacity, but I would quite vehemently argue for certain things to be in play, should we say.
You seem like that kind of guy. Not an argumentative kind of guy. Sorry, I've just seen a comment pop up on our feed. So we didn't go through this before, Steaders, but sometimes people comment, and we've had a right idiot comment in the comments right now. It is in fact Ed Stowe. Holla Beaches. Where is the boundary of reasonable? Will there be a decision needed to be made for every athlete query, or head into can we squat clean the first rep scenario? Is Ed's question. We don't have to. We might, in fact, we'll come to that in a minute, Ed, because I've got a couple of follow-ups on that. So, just before we go into the depths of what we've just sort of said, if it's not brought to the light of anybody and it's just sort of said to somebody else, there's not an awful lot that anyone can do. If me and Jason are standing there in the briefing, and you're over the other side, and I turn to Jason and go, hey, Jason, that seems dangerous. We should probably get something done about that. That seems like a stupid thing. And then I'll turn to someone else and go, oh, that seems like it might, we could fall over on that. And that's the end of the conversation, and nobody else says anything else. And all we've had is a three-way conversation, and that's it. Of course, the media is going to come along. Well, Sam LaRoche said this about the rope, and no one did anything about it.
Yep.
Well, just because he said it, just because I said it, doesn't mean I said it to the right person, doesn't mean I expressed it in a way that was helpful. I'd be really interested to get Scott on and talk about it. Potentially. Yep. We got you, why not Scott? But my next question is, why do we have, I know what the answer should be because I'm uniquely qualified for it, but do we have risk assessments for events?
I would imagine so, but it would be on the event directors and competition directors themselves. I mean, I know, weirdly enough, roundabout, because full well that the boss of my house is exactly in that same world, the same as you.
Yeah.
So I know that in relation to strength in depth, there's a lot of conversations happening behind this, making sure that, they're connected and having good chats about making sure things are squared away, risk assessment wise and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, realistically, that's the hallmark of a professional entity. In my mind, is making sure that those things are done. I mean, it's the boring but necessary things, and I say that as a wholeheartedly, like, I'm a trainer.
No, I get it. Nobody Nobody wants to write a risk assessment ever. And
Correct.
I was saying to you before that. So within the world of CrossFit, I'm not particularly qualified to speak on anything of any value, really, apart from my opinion. In health and safety, however, I held quite a lot of qualifications within the health and safety world. And actually, I could talk quite a bit about that with some level of authority.
Yep.
Now, the question for me, would be for any event, if there is any injury, because in the UK now, the only problem I don't have is I'm not au fait with international or specifically American health and safety law, because we have a UK, obviously we have a UK set of laws that and guidelines and regulations that we adhere to. So for strength in depth, for example, it would unfortunately come under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, which you have to provide a safe place of work, because realistically, these athletes are at work, right? Yep. They are self-employed athletes who are competing in a competition. Now they can sign waivers and they can sign a whole bunch of stuff. But if the organizers are found to be negligent, you could have signed 100 waivers. If they've not done their job properly, that's on them.
Yep.
So my kind of first, the bit out of that is sort of like, well, did we follow the risk assessment? Like, because if in the risk assessment it said then that the ropes are a certain length and they come onto the floor, we follow the risk assessment. Our insurers will have seen them before as well, because for our insurance we have to provide them all. See, we're not having a problem here.
Like, that's an interesting point. And when I I kind of had all my opinions formed, and then when I spoke, I had a little conversation with Brent Fakowski for the PFAA, and I asked specifically a few questions regarding this, and he had mentioned like insurance and things like that, and he sort of said, we don't know, we don't have all the details, and this is why the statement that was put out in a letter that's a bit kind of, well, we checked with CrossFit and they were happy with what we'd done, it's not our fault kind of thing. To me, it was a bit like, well, what did you check exactly? You said you checked, but checked what kind of thing? But we don't know if that had been assessed, as you said, if this is the rig, these are the ropes, this is what's going to happen, and they're like, yep, and we'll go ahead insuring that. If you then went and cut those ropes before the event and someone got injured, and then the insurance company can turn around and say, well, that's not what we agreed. You've messed with what you had set up insured. So there could be elements like that meant their hands were tied, and so they didn't. It's very easy.
You have to do, though, what is reasonably practicable is the phrase. So what is reasonably practicable is what you should be doing, which, if it is an unsafe scenario, regardless of what is written in your risk assessment and regardless of what you're insured to do, you eliminate the risk. And your insurance company are going to realistically, if they're any good at what it's not even the insurance company decide, it's actually a loss adjuster. And if your loss adjuster is any good, they'll say, okay, what was the risk before and what are the risks now? And if you have managed to reasonably and practically reduce the risk, you're on the winning side of that argument, or certainly. And it's really difficult because CrossFit are now
for you then, Sam.
Go on.
Hypothetical for you. They cut the ropes. Athlete comes running at the rope, jumps, the rope swings and whips a judge in the face. And then they get told, oh, it's because the rope was off the floor that it could swing. And so it was more dangerous than if it had excess rope on the floor and it wouldn't have whipped out when the person jumped on it.
Again, you're doing what's reasonably practicable.
Yeah, but do you see what I mean? But
yeah. No, I do get
how you've adjusted the rope.
But then you weigh up the probability of risk. There's a whole mate, I literally could talk for hours on this. I won't, because we haven't got very long. But there's a pyramid of risk and a probability of risk. So you work out what the probability is, and then you assess on, you put control measures in to lower the probability or lower the severity. So if, the probability of someone coming down and breaking their ankle is more than the rope being shorter and it hitting someone in the face, then you you reduce the risk. You reduce the probability of the higher risk by cutting the rope off. That's not saying no one's going to get hit in the face, but I would much rather see someone get hit in the face than break their ankle.
Oh, I've caught a rope many a time.
Oh, I got it in the back of the head at Origins. And yes, it hurts, but no one broke their ankle.
Correct. And plus, my face needs uglying up some, so it's okay.
Well, let's go back to Ed's question. So I was saying that is a reasonable question to ask. So Ed's basically saying, what are the boundaries of reasonable question?
In relation to
in a briefing, for example.
Oh, okay.
In a briefing, what is a reasonable question? So, questions like, can we squat clean the first rep?
Yeah, I think those are absolutely fine. Like if the question is, can I squat clean my first handstand push up, then I'm probably going to call you an idiot. But, I think legitimate questions are fine. That's what the briefing is for, to kind of leave, to eliminate as much ambiguity as possible, to eliminate as much gray area as possible. So that's the time to do that, because you do have quite literally the head judge's ear. And more often than not, that can really inform a better standard during the competition as well, during that event, because that's why you have normally the cadre of judges sat there listening, because then you can be like, right, did you hear those questions? So here was our answer. So therefore, is everybody tracking on what we're going to be doing as it pertains to that particular question, which hopefully is going to offset a lot of it, so a lot of it is what's reasonable. It's just well, whatever the standard needs to be is the standard, right? So for example, if we talk about hey, sumo deadlift high pulls, much maligned, everybody seems to get really annoyed at them as a movement. Range of motion from the training perspective is negotiable based on shoulder flexibility, range of motion, and all this kind of stuff. However, in the training, in the competition, you can't be well, it's not negotiable, is it? We're going to have to set an arbitrary range of motion. So I'm going to have to set barbell needs to be above collarbone. Now, if I say nothing about what the elbow height is, then you can probably get people doing some kind of weird hybrid-y power clean, muscle clean thing. But if the only arbitrary range of motion is barbell gets above collarbone, then that's all you need to brief to your athletes. How they choose to get from point A to point B is a matter for technique. But what you're looking for is both plates hit the ground, barbell clearly gets above collarbone, as an example. So same with GHD sit-ups, right? From a training perspective, we would talk about the angle that we want, or, the setup needs to be for the optimal use of that piece of equipment. But in competition, you're going to have folk who are just what didn't they say?
The stat essentially in competition, the standard is your hands touch the mat, your hands touch the pads. But that could be problematic as well. If you think about from a perspective of just, outside of sport, it's well, you get fun-sized athletes and you get large-sized GHDs, and making them hit the ground could be you might not be putting them into the best optimal positions for training, but that's the nature of sport, right? If I go up for a header in football and it smashes me in the face and goes in the back of the goal, I'm going to celebrate the shit out of it, but I'm sure as shit not going to practice that technique, So sport and what goes on in training, sometimes trying to figure out a range of motion that's going to work for most people most often, most of the time, there might be some weirdness that has to be accepted. But the point being, I digress, sorry, is to actually, answer and ask those questions. So as everybody is aware of where that, trying to eliminate as much gray area as possible, although it will never be 100%, I guess, is the aim of those athlete briefings, to raise concerns, to raise issues, because you've got captive audience being one, and you've also got the ear of the people that are going to make the major decisions. So that's the time and the place, if I'm honest. But that's also where my role comes in as competition liaison. As part of that brief is going to be, if you do have concerns, come find me after this. I will be here at this time. I will be here at this time. I will be here at this time. And so therefore you will have direct access to me with any concerns that you have. But I will be 100% honest. What my reply would be is, have you discussed this with your head judge team and or the competition directors? And if the answer is no, then I'm going to be well, then go do that. Do that first before you go chatting to the morning chalk up.
Correct.
So Ed's got well, Ed's
as they approach your turn and they see it, it's have you asked the competition? Oh, okay, I'll go do that.
All right. Ed's got a follow up because he is a fair advocate of the standard is the standard, but now he wants to ask, what's the risk assessment for athletes losing their shiitake mushrooms at judges because effectively their standards are substandard?
That would be a job for the head judge, and that is something that I've never been afraid of. If somebody's being an utter interesting character to that individual, you know, like that's a human problem. And so a lot of it is reminding that stuff is put into kind of like codes of conduct and stuff like that, in terms of like, especially at the games that I've been used to, is like, look, it's not just you as an athlete, it's also the people that support you as well. Because sometimes, you know, like people in the crowd can get, I get it, they're passionate, but they can kick off too. And it's like, there's something like that code of conduct, which has always been in play, which is like, you're not only responsible for your conduct on the field, but also for the people that are in your entourage as well. And I've seen that plenty of times where perhaps there might be sniping coming from the crowd, and I've seen an athlete be like get a grip of their own people, and that's good, because that's what it should be. You know, like for the vast majority of it, the judging team are a volunteer workforce, and so you have to protect them. And so my job as a head judge, or any head judge's role, is to provide air cover in that example. So if you are seeing like a character who's getting that, you know, there's a well-timed brief where it's going to be like, look, your job isn't to catch heat. So if you are catching heat, wow, you give us the signal. And I'm like, if I'm the head judge, I'm looking for this signal. And that just means like my judge needs an assistant, and that's fine. I'm going to be straight over there and be like, yeah, what's up? You know, and if it's getting a bit heated, I'm going to be like, don't worry, I got this. Like, you head out. And then I can at least kind of play that middle game. But that's why you have the layers when it comes to the competition factor, because it's like, it's my job to try and find a resolution and to de-escalate a lot of the time as well. Because I get it. Heart rates are high, passions are high. And so I get it. It can sometimes be a bit of a...
Well, a good athlete, I guess, as well, anyone who's worth their salt on the competition floor is not going to argue with their judge on the competition floor, because all that's going to do is make them lose, right? And they're not going to argue their way into some more reps, you know, especially if they're just being a massive knob.
Yeah, correct. So it's just making sure that you have an effective appeals process where, you know, and we've had that time and time and time, like, what does that look like? That can't be, you know, written on a mobile phone. It has to be like, here's the process, here's it all set. We have whether that's going to be going up to the broadcast team and being like, right, we need to replay a thing, and having a head judge who sits there and replays it and makes an assessment, or whether you're going to have your own appeals process, where we've had in the past in regionals, where you have an independent person sat at the side who has a camera at like start line, finish line, midfield. And so you've got arcs of fire that cover the whole thing. And they literally play it from the start of play to the finish of play. You go over there. One of the head judges sits there and watches the whole thing, counts reps, looks for range of motion, like whatever it may be. So if you've got that solid process, then you begin the appeals process. And then that means that things get appeased. I mean, let's be honest, you know, no athlete likes having a call made against them, rightly or wrongly. Like that just never goes well, because it's humans and they're passionate about what they do. But if you've got that solid process in the background, it's like, yep, we reviewed the appeals process. We don't feel like you have a valid thing. Like, that's it. You know, like the judge's decision is final. If it's a rep count gone awry, fine. As humans, we can double check that and readjust that, because that's pretty easy. I mean, even a half decent head judge can watch something at 3 times speed on a YouTube clip and still be able to be like 1, 2, 3. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine. The range of motion standards could be like, yeah, you know, like we have a look at that and roll through it. But there's always ways of being able to get an extra layer to it. But realistically, most on-field calls we're going to stick to, because we trust our judges and we develop them, and we make sure that where they're there. And so if you allow every single person for any single insignificant reason, although it would be significant to them, but if they were to make any call and they're just like, oh no, I need an appeal, it's like the competitions would never run, because you'd just be going through every single person's heat and trying to judge that retrospectively, you know? So there has to be a standard of like, you can appeal for this, but this is an on-field decision and we stick by that. And that's just any competition, right? That's footy, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
but footy's a really good example, because there are specific boundaries of where VAR will watch something.
Exactly.
And there are other things where that, as you say, that is an on-field decision. We have no say in this. And yes, we could go watch it back, but we've already said that we're not going to, because it's an on-field decision. So
Nailed it.
and I think that, but I think that something like that would be a useful thing to have communicated. I'm not suggesting you do that right now. And I'm not even suggesting that it happens this year necessarily, because it's taken 100 years for football to get VAR. Do you know what I mean?
Already, and we've had it since we started, mate. It's always been there.
Ed's still in the chat. We'd love to see Nigel Owens ref a CrossFit competition.
So would I. But he'd be like, brilliant. This is CrossFit. This isn't F45. You know what he did.
Oh, I wonder if he's for hire, just for videos like that.
Again,
Jason, you look animated in the background there.
No, I'm just digesting everything. That's all. No, because I do wonder with the role of competition liaison, if that, I don't know, if that makes athletes feel, well, it could go one of two ways, I guess, because you could feel like, oh, I can appeal because there's maybe not a bias here that, like, I mean, even you're reflecting as like our judges, but obviously for the actual like SiD team, they are our judges, whereas you are there not as part of the SiD team, but part of CrossFit. So I might feel like, there's no point in me fighting this, because of course they're going to protect their own. Of course they're not going to care about me. They're going to put their, oh, actually, there's a liaison here. Or I might feel more free to approach. But then at the same time, it could be the opposite, where you're like, oh, it's only SiD. Like, I can appeal, I'm a big name in this sport. I can appeal and they're going to have to listen to me. But, oh, hold on. There's actually a rep from CrossFit here. I better absolutely make sure. So I do kind of wonder if there is this sort of, not distancing, but what the effect is for the athletes, that you've got someone there who is kind of part of the team, but technically they're not. They're actually there representing CrossFit. And whether that makes people like emboldened and feel freer to kind of interject and kick off, or whether that makes them think, well, actually, I better be on my best behavior because CrossFit's watching.
Bit of both, man. Bit of both. Let's be honest. I think a lot of it is, does the individual have the soft skills to be able to just be a human at the end of the day, right? Because it's like, I get it. You get to walk in and I guess you're wearing the cap off, like, hey, CrossFit HQ, but realistically, I'm still just me. And so a lot of those athletes should hopefully know me, hopefully, but there's always going to be folk that I don't. But if I'm there and I'm approachable and I'm available, all of these different situations, it's just like, hey, I'm right here for you. And I mean, realistically, that's on me too. I've got to be making sure that I'm not just kind of like, hey, I'm here at these things, but I'm going to go and stroll through the athlete area as well. Like I wouldn't do that if I was head judge, because I have to have that degree of separation. So unless somebody calls me directly for a concern, I'm going to stay the hell away from the athlete area. Same as like, I wouldn't want to see my judges in a judge's t-shirt running over to go and get like autographs from their favorite CrossFit athlete, because that's a lack of professionalism. Although they might want to, I'm going to be like, hey, take your shirt off and go do that shit. Like, I get it. We're all fanboys, but there's a degree of like professionalism that needs to exist there. Whereas from this point of view, I don't have to worry about that. So I can like literally walk into that athlete area and make those connections and be like, how's everybody doing? Are we doing okay? Read the room. That's the soft skills of like what I have to do most often for the job anyway. So I'd like to think that that's what they've selected for these roles as well, is just recognizing that, yes, okay, they might have the experience of the game side stuff or whatever level of competition and got that time in trade, that they can lend some experience to the characters that are running. But at the same vein as well, that they should also have the soft skills, which is, I guess, why a lot of them are robbed from the seminar staff, because that's what we're selected for as well, right? Can you actually hold a conversation and want to go and engage other humans? So if we can go do that as well, then that means that we kind of connect the dots between a lot of the stuff, which isn't an us versus them mentality. Realistically, a lot of it is going to have to be actually talking to the people in the event and saying, like, we're not here to be Big Brother. It's your event. I'm here as a support network. So there's multiple levels there where you're going to have to be a personable chap or chapess to go and actually be in the mix and be like, I'm here to help, rather than like, I'm here to strut and be, not that I'd be able to do that anyway, because I'd want to throw up, but like go in and just played a game of
I
like
could see you just swaggering around.
playing the big I am. Do you know what I mean? Like,
But you're,
I mean, to be honest though,
swag.
this is what, like, this has been, you know, I've done quite a deep dive on this whole Scott Panchek thing, and the thing that I've still just doesn't sit with me is this sort of thing of like, well, you know, because even CrossFit saying, oh, like it wasn't communicated to us in time, and maybe they didn't understand about like using the liaison, and I kind of get that, but I also think why does that even matter? It isn't CrossFit that we're putting on. Like, yes, it's their semi-final, but you put on this event, you're responsible. Why did, you know, if there had been broken glass on a lane, you wouldn't have to run off and tell CrossFit, are we allowed to clean up the broken glass, right? You just saw it, and I just find it so weird.
Such a good analogy, Jace. I don't often compliment you, but brilliant.
Thank you.
I often say about pint-sized athletes, like Karl just did, but
yeah.
well,
because I also the reason that, you know, like that the other video I made about the CrossFit Liaison, and when I actually reached out to Karl and he got back to me, which was very nice, was because I had this idea in mind that people were going to react as CrossFit's been messing up every stage of this event, and now and you know what, because like people like Hiller are calling them out, or we've just created this role out of nowhere to kind of show that we're responsible. And so, you know, I spoke with Bosman and I spoke with Karl, and I felt like, no, and I put out a video saying like, no, apparently this was, you know, the plan from day one, and, you know, Karl knew about it months ago, so it wasn't a reaction kind of thing. So it irritates me kind of after defending the role that week one, this liaison is kind of getting thrown under the bus of being like, well, you know, they didn't, the athletes didn't know who to speak to.
They
and
clearly didn't communicate it well enough.
Breakdown in communication. It seems that people didn't understand that they should have spoke to the liaison. And I just think, well, one, okay, maybe there was this breakdown, but I also don't think that that is the reason that Scott got injured. Like that to me doesn't make any sense, because also, you know, you're talking like, Karl, you've got, you know, years of experience within CrossFit. But I still think if Scott Panchek says, you know, I've been competing at a very high level for a long time, I've seen this happen, I've been around this a lot. It's not like going like him saying it and we go, no, I don't know. Oh, I go and speak to the liaison, and the liaison says, yeah, it is dangerous. Oh, okay, we'll do something about, like, why should that matter? You've got the people there that are doing it that know. Like, listen to that. I mean, I think it would be the same if, you know, someone from the media team came and said, well, look, you've asked us to run a camera here. You do realize that that's going to be a trip hazard for people when they're running on the last leg of this.
Yeah.
Okay, they're media. They've got nothing to do with competing, but they're an expert in their field.
Yeah.
You should listen to them.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I say this with the perspective of being involved in CrossFit competitions since about 2011, and I mean up at regionals and or games level. Right from that point, you have no idea how many eyes there are on every single facet, you know, like even down to running gear onto the dance floor, right, for the next heat. You've got the individual, like, people that are running the barbells on, all the people, like, they've got somebody who's directing them. Somebody has already pre-staged that with somebody watching what they do in the back, right? It runs onto the dance floor. Then you have the equipment lead, walks the dance floor, checking that stuff is there, to then have one of the head judges, then, like, this is like the next level. Then they're like, right, okay, now I'm going to walk that dance floor and do that stuff. So there's just Overwatch on Overwatch on Overwatch on Overwatch, like layer and layer and layer and layer. But that doesn't mean that stuff occasionally doesn't sneak under the radar, but it's not very often.
No, but Ed's got a quick. I'll go back to Ed's question, because
of course it's Ed. Is Ed?
Mando Stoke. I probably. To be honest,
should we just shoot Ed a link?
Yeah. No, he's too opinionated. Let's let him write in the chat. Otherwise, we won't shut him up. Is it time for a professional judges association? The Athletes Association, event management, and media all have strong vocal representation. Are judges missing a voice in the community? I'm going to answer that first. No. But really, it's like, I don't mean that for me, I don't mean that in a slur or to devalue our judges whatsoever. But as soon as we get, I mean, it's good to have a judges association. The only reason that would be good is for ill treatment by a competition of judges or something along those lines, right? But your judge is your judge for your lane, and that they're done. That's their job done. And if they feel, as we said earlier, if they feel gotten at by an athlete, then they go speak, head judge comes over, you remove yourself from the situation, and they deal with it. If they feel hard done by a head judge, they just don't do it anymore. or they speak to the event organizer, or whoever. And that could be the competition liaison from CrossFit. There's no reason, I've been treated in this particular way by this competition. I just wanted to let you know that as feedback. I fed it back to the competition. I can feed it back to you. And Ed probably will come back on that, but I'd be interested to see what you guys think.
I'm sure he wouldn't.
Oh, Ed.
Yeah, I think as anything grows, then more professional bodies start to sit alongside it, right? So it's the same as like you can draw the parallels with rugby, right? For years, they played the sport for the love of it, and then it became a profession. Then it became like then you'd have the PFA and all that kind of stuff. Same with as that grows, then so does the professionalization of the refereeing and all that kind of stuff as well, So it's not just a Sunday thing. So is it something that's in the future? Yeah, exactly. Is it something that's in the future? Who knows? Like that's way above my pay grade. But I think there's a voice, like I think there's a failure to recognize sometimes that a lot of the folk that are in perhaps head judge roles now have got a lot of time of trade of just being, and I don't mean that to sound derogatory, but of being the floor judge. So they've spent a lot of time in the mix of doing all that stuff. So if I could I can only use my own experiences, right, to kind of validate the point. But
so we have.
So I spent years of being the floor judge, running from venue to venue at the games with the rest of the crew and being like, right, what event are we doing? Right, I've got my athlete in front of me, right, like holding the standard as best as I could, and getting smashed with, people not being happy with you and all that kind of stuff. That's the job you sign up for. And then it gets to the point where now you're in sort of the Overwatch role where you're either an assistant head judge or the head judge or whatever it may be. But that's a very thing that I think is unique to CrossFit, in that every single person in that place does the thing. Like you don't get that anywhere else. Like everybody is still there, in any other facets would be like, oh, they might have done the thing, or they might, like just like watching the thing, but no, quite genuinely, every single person, from the person running the barbell onto the floor, to the floor judge, to the head judge, to the athletes, does the thing regularly. So they're well aware and they have that buy-in and that concept. So, everybody who goes up the judging Carter, of course they're giving the voice for the judges, they're going to be like, how do we make this easier for them to make a call? How do we make standards? And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's been interesting judging standards across the years in CrossFit where you're like, I think this is going to make our life a little bit harder if I'm honest. And then like, we'll roll with it and then go like, yeah, that needs to change, like whatever it may be, handstand push-up standards, like they kind of changed over the years, but it's all done with the lens of how can we make this standard easy to quantify and therefore easy to judge. So I think the voice is always there, and it's always being advocated for, like it's not trying to make a judge's life harder. It's not trying to make an athlete's life harder. It's just quite simply being like, how can we assign a range of motion to something that can be a blanket proposal to create a field of play? And so that's where it can be interesting. But in terms of the voice for the judge, it's pretty much there, I think, like the individual floor judge, but then everything has rank and process, right? Like I whinge up. See, I don't whinge down.
I'm thinking, I'm going to back you, Ed. Don't worry. Keep listening. A couple of things that I'm thinking then is one, he's talking of like there being more of a voice on other things. And I think that's probably because where media like directs itself. And so obviously like at an event, they want to highlight everything that the athletes have done, and anything strange that has happened, they'll do you got a morning chalk up and you'll read like 10 different stories of stuff that happened at this event, and they will all be based on the athletes, right? It's rare that you're going to see a story from the judges. So maybe Ed, you should talk to me and we'll make a video, put something on my channel, and we'll highlight some issues that judges have had, maybe, or common problems that they're facing at the moment. That would be good. Then I'm thinking like the PFAA is basically a coalition of athletes that have, kind of gone out of their way themselves, but in their time to sort of accumulate data. So I kind of had this issue with the PFAA that I found it weird that Brent Fikowski, the tallest CrossFitter, was kind of running this thing, and it seems the only thing they ever tell competitions is about the height of the bar and the rings. And I was like, there seems to be a little bit of bias here. This seems like the only thing you care about is making sure you're not kicking the floor. But then I was thinking, well, they've got data for that. They've accumulated all this data. So when they go to a competition, they can say, look, this is what 60 different athletes have said. This is what we think. And it'd be beneficial if you just took our advice, because we've done the legwork. And I don't see why judges couldn't do a similar thing. So, putting together a voice and being able to go to a competition and say, like, okay, you've given us the workouts. This workout, this is the movement standard you've written. Why? Oh, because we think this will be, this will look good, and it's kind of like our unique twist. No, this will not work. Like, this will be very hard to judge. And if you've got the backing of a lot of judges, or maybe even being able to say, in fact, this competition used a very similar standard, and there was a lot of questionable reps because we realized in this position it was very difficult to see if the rep had been completed or not. You could go with a unified voice, and maybe having that unified voice could be more impactful at a competition. You could, make change. But as with the PFAA, that's kind of something that maybe judges just need to listen, but it's going to be sort of, it's basically just adding weight to an argument, and maybe being able to preempt things, and maybe being able to change things. Whereas perhaps a judge on his own going up to a competition director and saying, yeah, I don't like this movement standard, you're probably not going to get them to change. But if you've got data, the weight, the multitude of voices backing you, and maybe, and this is something that the PFA haven't done, and I don't understand why not. Best practices for athletes and things. So for example, legless rope climbs, the rope shouldn't be on the floor. There you go. There's, that would be
an easy one.
Thing. But maybe judges, could have put together a best practice. Like, we need to make sure that judges are getting X amount of rest between heats if possible. We need to make sure that judges are, there could be a list of things.
I think, well, that kind of brings us to another question from someone else. It's less that judges are an easy shift of blame focus from those comps where the project and risk management might not be to the standard of those comps that Karl has in mind. So, and I get that. No, and that's not, we're not, generally speaking, at the moment, we're talking semi-finals, right? Because that's where it came. I am fairly militant at the events that I MC and compare at, and I have, all the way from local box comp all the way up to, hopefully in a couple of weeks, a semi-final, banging. And I get it. And this is where I don't think a collective voice because actually, Jason, what you're saying is, I don't think judges should be asking, why is the standard that way? Because I think that's just way too subjective, because one judge might love it, another judge might hate it. As everywhere said, the standard is the standard, and the competition makes up the standard. I actually do watch Hiller. I've just said it live on a podcast. Oh my goodness. But what he put out something that was very similar to what you said earlier, Karl, just today, in that everything, every competition is made up, right? Football is a made up game. Rugby is a made up game. CrossFit, a made up game. Yes, it's a methodology, but the sport is made up. A GHD machine is not to do GHD sit-ups on in your gym, right? You might do them because you see them in competitions, but on your level 1, you're not taught GHD sit-ups. You're taught to do a glute ham develop. That's the whole point.
I'm going to have to you on two things I've got to call you out on there. It's not a machine. There's no working parts. So
no. All right. Sorry, it's just called a glute ham developer. I apologize.
Right. And the second thing is, yeah, we do teach GHD setups to parallel and full range as part of the
I lost that one on my. I must have not been listening.
Right, don't you worry. It's towards the end of day 2, so you're probably
probably. I was actually worried about the test. I imagine is what was happening at that point.
I would agree. But my point, but yeah, you're exactly right. And I mean, that's the thing. You got made up. You're trying to find an arbitrary range of motions. You're late to the party, Ed. I've already said that, mate. Get out of here.
And hold on, I noticed that you didn't put up the comment where Ed agrees with me.
No, sorry. I was trying to read and talk at the same time. You know, I'm a geezer. I can't do two things at once.
Exactly.
Wholeheartedly.
Judging
best practice. Go on. Judging best practice needs to come from judges, not event organizers or athletes.
Okay, well, the head judges, I think, is what he's trying to say. Yeah, and yes, I agree. Yes. So what you've got going on there is everybody. There seems to be an assumption that everybody takes the dance floor with these arbitrary range of motions, and we haven't done several run-throughs of the event. We haven't done practice reps. We haven't had Q&As with the judges themselves, absent of any other situation. And that's a big assumption, because any good competition has done all of those things and has allowed, and I'll be honest with you, right, as the perspective of having the questions that I sometimes get from judges about judging standards and the questions that I get from athletes about judging standards are equally as bonkers sometimes, where you're just like, I think everyone's gone a bit too far down the rabbit hole here, where it's like, it's about 5,000 questions over thrusters. And you're like, genuinely, like, I'm a bit of an idiot that way, right? But it's like, it's a thruster. Like, what are you trying to say? Like, can I back rack the thruster? No, because then it's not a thruster. So there are sometimes where people can kind of spin up to try and fabricate craziness from both elements, right? Where I think that's where you probably do need to have a solid head judge you can listen to all of those things and allow a platform for all of those things, but be like, now let's get a grip, people. Like, we're talking about this movement and here's what we need to see happen. Like, don't try to listen too much to what's not being said. It's like, it's a thruster. Get below parallel, lock that sucker out overhead. And if anybody's going to be like, well, what do you mean by overhead? It's like this overhead. And I'm going to be like, well, I guess technically, but we all know that you're being a knob right now. So no, you know what we mean by like overhead, but I'll clarify. It's here. So as it's over the center of the body. They're like, oh, okay. So,
but that will all be in the sport guide.
Exactly.
Everything that every stupid question, all that stupid questions show is that the person has not read the sport guide, because it won't say overhead in the sport guide. It will specifically say elbows, elbows over shoulder, hands over elbows over shoulders, over your head. That is probably along the lines of what it will say in the sport guide.
Yeah, but
we just use overhead as an easy.
Do you ever watch Taskmaster?
No, I watch TV in the evening.
You've got to go and find it. But whenever he's got the task and they start asking random questions, he's just like, all the information's on the task, and he just won't give them anything, and they have to like go back and read it again, and then they're like, oh, but all the information's on the task. And I think that's what you need. Is just be like, you should have a list of things that are in the guide, and you refuse to answer them unless it's a question. Like, if they can come up with a question that is not in the guide, we'll answer it. Otherwise, it's in the guide.
But again, it all comes back to, if I'm being honest, is like, there are opportunities to ask those questions and to have a voice. That's got to be a process, has to be available. So whether that's athletes asking questions of the head judge, whether that's the judges asking the question of the head judge, whether, whatever that needs to be, that has to be an open forum, because it has to be given. Like, that's how everything progresses. Like, we're a CrossFit, in terms of like the entities that work on the seminar staff or at the competition level, is a feedback rich environment. There's always after action reports after every day. There's always a sit down debrief after every day one. I mean, I've been in the rooms at the end of the games after for all the years where you sat there and, Dave was there and he'd be asking questions of every single one, no matter where we were, like, how'd your competition go? Where were your issues? Like, talk to me about this. And, what do we need to adjust for next time? And so it's a constant growth process. And that hasn't changed, because those processes, which, if I'm being honest, is like a lot to do with Dave and his background in terms of being in the SEAL teams and stuff, those processes and developing the teams and making sure things get adhered to, are part of our DNA now. So whether he's here or whether he's not, those processes remain. And so therefore it's still in play. Like, so all of those things, and we take those down to whatever other job we have to do, like competition liaison. Is like, hey, why don't you have a process for this? That needs to be gripped for next time, or whatever it needs to be. Because as you said, right, that phrase like is one of my nightmares. Like, what is reasonable and practicable, right? Because my wife says it about 50,000 times a damn day, but it's true. You know, like, as long as you're looking at something and being like, where's the potential risk, and mitigating it to the best that you can, then from my understanding, that is kind of health and safety in any way, shape or form, whether that's going to be judging standards, whether that's going to be equipment on the floor and spacing. And, you know, realistically, there's a missing link that I think a lot of people forget here. You've got, like, especially at the semi-finals level, which again is all I can give the perspective of, you've got characters like Rogue there who have got a crew that have worked, and they are the same crew, you know, like, that have worked this since day zero. And so, like, literally they'll come over and just be like give you a little nudge and be like, see that, like, that needs getting a grip of. So you've got so many eyes and so many kind of like people who are, we seem to think that the buck stops with, you know, just a certain individual. But if I'm being honest, you've got so many.
But in some instances, though, the buck has to stop with an individual. Because an easy example of that would be if there was an event. In fact, I think Brent talked about it actually he did an interview with the Morning Chalk Up today, and he talked about an event at the games where there was a lunge, but it was raining, and some of the demo team ended up doing the splits in the lunge because it was raining and it was wet. Right now, that has to be. I mean, there will be a group of people who make a decision, but eventually it comes down to one person, and I don't know who that would necessarily be. Possibly the head judge, possibly the competition organizer, whoever it is, to go, this is unsafe. We can't, you know, regardless of what the TV schedule would say now, because there is a broadcast schedule and it's supposed to go in this way. You know, it is raining. We can't put these guys out on a lifting platform to do a 1 rep max in the rain. We can't do it. It's not, you know, we're not taking reasonably practicable steps. Now, I think reasonably practicable is such a rubbish, because it's so vague. That is literally but it's deliberately vague, because then you could never win. Is my experience of it. I've been, well, not me personally, but I've dealt with claims multiple times. I'm currently dealing with 3. Okay. Unlikely to win any. And I'm really good at what I do, but I still can't win, because you are in this instance, in the health and safety instance, you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent, because there are certain criteria that are set and certain levels of, you know, certain levels of eyes that go over stuff that are set, and you have to prove that you've done all that you can in order to not have to lose the claim. So if Scott decided, you know what, I'm going to sue the syndicate, he's probably going to win, because they're just fighting a losing battle. But it goes back to sort of the idea that everybody is responsible, though. So everybody, and that's what I literally was on site. When was I on site? Friday. And I gave, in the construction industry, we call it toolbox talks, right? And it's essentially like a team briefing, but a toolbox talk on health and safety, just generally, and working areas. So it's really applicable to this exact situation. So I gave a toolbox talk on work areas, and I said, look, I have 26 sites that I oversee. I cannot be on all 26 at every, you know, you might think I'm God. I'm not. I can't be in all 26 places at the same time. I rely on every single person here to assess whether this is a safe working environment. If you don't think it's a safe working environment, then it's not a safe working environment. You don't need to, you know, and you need to express that. Otherwise, how is anyone ever going to make it safe? Unless you're actually going to make it safe. Unless Scott Panchik walked out and cut all the ropes off, then you know, and then he's done it. He's essentially made it safe, if for a better word. Or you speak to your line manager, who might be you know, the head judge or the competition liaison or whoever to make it safe. You don't just, oh, well, you know, and I'm not saying that he did this, but the way that the media is portraying it is, well, one side of the media is portraying it, or the media are portraying it as, well, Scott said something and no one did anything about it. But then other people are saying, well, we didn't know and they didn't know and these people didn't know. So if he did say it, like, who did he say it to? You know, and things like that. And it's the same for my guys. If there's a big hole in the floor and a 4-meter drop, it's probably not very safe, is it? Do you know what I mean? And if it's not safe, tell somebody and they'll do something about it. Because at the end of the day, for these athletes, it's different. For the guys on site, you're not doing health and safety for you. You're doing health and safety for the people you're going home to at the end of the day. Like the reason for being healthy and safe is not here on the building site. It's all the people who are going to miss you if you don't leave the building site or you leave the building site in an ambulance. Do you know what I mean? It's the same for athletes. All the people who care about you, you know, it's not just for you. You might be providing for Scott, providing for his family. You know, that might be their lone source. It is a source of income for them. If he can't compete anymore, that's their income.
I mean,
gone.
Technically he's retired. So if he can't compete anymore, he shouldn't have retired. That's a big problem. I mean, I find it funny as well that we talk about health and safety. Like, is this dangerous, having a bit of rope on the floor? Like, I don't know. Is it dangerous trying to climb it 10 times without using your legs and running really fast and being tired? Do you know what I mean? Like, you could fall off the top as well.
But the difference is you train. But the difference is you train for that, right? And that's the difference. That's the whole idea. Like, there are people who do things on building sites every day that are ridiculously dangerous. There are guys that walk along the top of skyscrapers, right? And they're just held on by a piece of rope. That's ridiculously dangerous. But they do it because they're trained and they have certain qualifications that mean they're trained to do it. These guys train every day to push themselves to the limit to try and be the fittest on earth. So that involves climbing up and down a rope, a 15-foot rope every time, and running 50 meters or 50 feet, which is like,
you say that, Sam. My response to that would be watch the first 2 heats and then see how many.
You're a horrible.
Yeah, my other thought is conspiracy theory. Maybe he pointed it out because he wasn't feeling great and he aimed for the bit of rope, because, you know, what a coincidence that in all the heats it's the only one that hurt himself was the one that pointed it out. So
and that's why you'll never be the real media.
And I had another thought, but I lost it earlier because there was something else on that I thought was interesting. But anyway, there you go. That's
I hope you've been able to portray what you want to portray, Steaders, as much as we've sort of grilled you a bit, because I know that I did tell you we were going to grill you a bit before. But
hey, man, I can only give my perspective from where I'm sat,
mate.
Right?
That's it. Absolutely. And Jace, I hope you've got what you need to build your epic media career once you've left Plate Stack Chat and gone to, you know, wherever you're going to, Fox News or something. I don't know, Fox News. I don't know. Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, thanks to Ed, our 4th member around the Plate Stack today, for chipping in so much and correcting me at every turn. Thank you very much, Steaders, for coming on, being the legend that you are, giving up your time. I know you haven't eaten yet, and your family probably are eating without you, I'd imagine, knowing them. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It's been amazing. Jace, as always, thank you very much. If you want to follow us on social media, we are at plate.stack.chat. I'm at La Roche Original. Jason is at Jason CF Media. Steaders, I mean, you could get Steaders at CrossFit UK. Or do you want me to give your personal one out? To be honest, I haven't got it written down, but I can do that. If you can do that if you want to. Sure, man. It's super hard to remember. It's at Karl Steadman. There you go. That's why I can't remember it. It's ridiculously hard. It's hard to remember, to be fair. The one and only Karl with a K. Not the one and only, because Jason's middle name is also Karl with a K. Flow State, home of CrossFit Tewkesbury. That is going to be, is that Coach Shorts?
Yeah, that's Luke.
Have I missed it? You have unfortunately missed it, but you can watch it back tomorrow morning or listen to it on.
Watch it back immediately as soon as this ends.
I thought it went out. Oh, well,
goes out as an audio only podcast tomorrow morning 6 a.m. But you can, as soon as we end this, you can just go back and start. Or actually, before we end it, you could just like scroll back and start it
and start again.
So if
you
this
want
is
to
exactly the same
now.
as all the CrossFit semi-finals we've been watching over the weekend, the same way they ran. The only difference is we're not going to cut it up afterwards and tell you where each heat starts.
Well, yeah, as I said, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I've been Sam. You've been awesome. Thank you very much. Love you lots. Goodbye.